and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we'll start by welcoming everyone, just to let everyone know we are live streaming the board meeting tonight. So the green light is on, and so hopefully that is all working. So we'll welcome those who are also not in the room with us. As far as consent agenda items, I believe we have a change. Shannon?
Correct. I'd like to request that we move additional days for the 22-23 school year down under recommendations.
Okay, so we'll take that out from consent agenda items, and then we'll move it down under recommendations. So with that change, do I have a motion to accept consent agenda items?
Motion.
Motion by Earl. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Travis. Any discussion? All those in favor? Yeah, sorry. Call the roll, Susan.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Earl?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the consent agenda items pass. Next, I would like to ask if there's anyone who would like to speak on any items that are on the agenda or any other topic. Okay. Hearing no one requesting to speak, we'll move on to new business. So Neola policies.
So I'm recommending tabling the packet of policies with the exception of policy 3220.01, and that's the teacher appreciation grant, and asking for that to just be an informed first reading.
Okay. Do we need to vote on tabling those, or we're just pulling them? That's
You vote to table
okay.
these
Since they were on the
I
agenda.
wanted to make sure. So we have the first reading on teacher appreciation grants. That's the policy 3220.01. All of the other policies, I need a motion to table those policies for this board meeting.
So moved.
I have a motion by Pat. Do I have a second? Second by Susan. Any discussion? Hearing none. Susan, will you call the roll, please?
Chelsea?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Earl?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, 7-0. Next, we'll move down under programs. We have a contract for approval. Nikki?
Yes, asking for approval for the NWEA testing contract K through 6. This is an assessment that we've been working on planning for using next school year, but we have formative assessment grant dollars left from this year's grant, so we can go ahead and use it to pay for some PD to give everyone plenty of time to get used to that program and have an opportunity to see it a year ahead of time. So asking for approval to have that contract approved and use those grant dollars.
Wait, I have a question. I think we have to do a motion first and then we'll have discussion, right? I believe we do.
Yes, you do.
So we'll get to your question in just a moment, Susan. So do I have a motion to accept this contract, the NWEA contract?
So
Motion by Pat. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tony. Now, any discussion?
Is this a new formative assessment tool? Are we getting rid of an old formative assessment tool?
Yes, so this,
Adopting a new one?
yes, so the state no longer for K through 6 approves what we've had in the past.
Is that STAR?
Yes, so we have and ClearSight is approved, but the teachers didn't prefer that one, so we'll be making the transition over the course of a year.
And
So
we
it's
have
not
done
set.
this one previously.
We have, which was why that was, I think, the
So we're
favorite.
going back to an old favorite.
And this one, a nice bonus I'll just mention is it also covers our dyslexia screening, so will actually mean over time less testing for our kids.
Great question, Susan. Any other discussion? Okay, so I have a motion and we have a second. No other discussion. We'll take a vote. If Susan, you'll call the roll.
Chelsea? Chelsea?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Earl?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, 7-0.
Amy,
Yes?
I have a question back on the Neola policies.
Yes.
You tabled 2 through 13 and voted on it, but what about voting on the first
The first one was just a
Inform.
first reading, so it was an inform.
Gotcha,
We
okay,
didn't need to vote on that one.
okay.
Okay,
Understood.
perfect. Yeah, absolutely, good question. So next, we're moving on to Goal Book Toolkit. I believe, Todd, you have this one.
So this is part of our ICTQ grant for our facilitators in training. This is a toolkit that allows them to bring UDL practices into their lessons. So they can pick a subject, they can pick a standard, and then it will give them strategies to use for UDL in their classroom. So it's for our 20 facilitators in training this year, but it's part of our ICTQ grant.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the Goal Book Toolkit?
Motion.
Motion by Earl, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Pat. Any discussion?
Yeah, could you be a little bit more detailed about, I want to know exactly what that is.
Yeah, so it's a program that the teachers will have access to, and then it will match up with our Indiana standards. So they can go in and let's say they're teaching a math lesson that they can go in, they can then find different ways for representation of how they show the material. They can find different ways for the students to represent that material, what they've learned, and give it back to them. So it just helps the teachers, instead of kind of expecting them to plan all of the lessons and come up with all of these UDL practices. It just gives them kind of a tutorial and helps them plan, gives them resources.
So is this for all teachers or for 20 users?
So for this one, this is just for our 20 users. This is our part of our ICTQ where we're training our facilitators in training, which we have, that's our 20 teachers who are getting trained through IU to have UDL practices, learn the principles of UDL, and then they're gonna go branch out and start training our teachers.
Okay, so this
And
is
that's all,
great.
that's covered in that grant.
Yes.
This is the core group of teachers.
Yes.
They're going to be utilizing this, and then we'll be
Yep.
trained and share that with.
Train the trainers.
This is still year 2 of our 5-year grant. So we're still just working with the small 20 group staff right now.
What does that cost us?
For the 20 users, no, it was built into our grant. The contract, I think you have the contract.
Contract is here. Here it is. $21,420.
And that is for 2 years.
And is that paid entirely out of the ICTQ
Yes.
grant?
Yep.
Any additional questions or discussion? So I have a motion and I have a second. If no further discussion, Susan, will you call a roll?
Chelsea?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Earl?
Yes.
Yes.
7-0.
Thank you, Chelsea.
So next, under professional staff, we will go down under recommendations.
Yes, asking for the board to approve career increment master teacher stipend for Jason Gambrell and Kelly Gambrell. Asking for approval for Casey Ernstis for the Jennings County High School volunteer boys and girls swimming and diving coach. Led Leimert as Jennings County High School English teacher. Amanda Ruddick as a JCEC, HSE online teacher. And Molly Vaughn for the Jennings County Middle School SPED Department Chair. Asking for approval.
Will the additional days?
And, I'm sorry, yes,
Okay.
and the additional days that we moved.
Okay. So I've got, I need a motion for the recommendations that were just read, and in addition, the additional days for the 22-23 school year as listed on the agenda. So I need a motion for that.
So moved.
I have a motion by Pat. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Tony. Any discussion?
Got a question about the extra days. Are those days that we give every year for those folks?
Yes.
There's nothing extra or special there this year?
No, no changes. And I did verify with both the high school and middle school principal that those were the same days that would be needed for the following year. They had the same needs.
Any additional discussion? Okay, I have a motion and a second. No additional discussion, we'll call the roll. Susan, you want to do that?
Chelsea,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Travis.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Earl.
Yes.
Susan, yes.
Okay, down under support staff, we have additional recommendations. Shannon?
Asking the board for approval for Alvy Applegate, moving from NVE summer custodian to a part-time custodian. Mark Boardman for Hayden Elementary second shift custodian. Desiree Burdine at Graham Creek Elementary as an ESSER parapro. Lindy Dupe as a Versailles bus contract for the 22-23 school year. Gary Driver is moving from a 6-hour driver position to an 8-hour. Diana Earl is going to be the Jennings County High School music parapro. Tiffany Quintero Francisco will be working at Sand Creek as a parapro. Drew Goins as Jennings County High School volunteer assistant football coach. Leah Harriman as Jennings County High School color guard. Talina Hearn moving from part-time at NVE to full-time. Custodian John Irwin is going to be a Jennings County School sub-bus driver. Jewel Lewis is going to be a Jennings County High School cook. Dylan Luttrell is the Jennings County High School bus transportation mechanic. Dwight Patterson is moving from a 6-hour to an 8-hour bus driver. Lena Ritchie is going to be a going from Sand Creek Elementary summer custodian to a part-time custodian. Sheila Terrell is going to have a Versailles bus contract for the 22-23 school year. Andrew Titus is going to be the high school assistant boys soccer coach. Catherine Todd, Hayden Elementary 29-hour parapro. Madison Boss, Hayden Elementary parapro. Misty Wingett, a Jennings County Middle School cook. And Charles Worrell, he's going to be the Jennings County Middle School custodian, moving from the Jennings County Middle School custodian to JCEC, Jennings County Middle School split position custodian. Asking for approval.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept those recommendations?
So moved.
I have a motion by Travis, I have a second by Tony. Any discussion? If no discussion, Susan, will you call the roll?
Chelsea.
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Travis.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Earl.
Yes.
Yes.
7-0. So under finances, it looks like we have some donations.
Yes, Scott Terry, DDS, $200 to the Jennings County High School for school supply shop. Viv and Gail Gines, $100 to Brush Creek for student snacks. Walmart, North Vernon, $580 to the middle school for archery equipment. Jennings County High School's classes of 2000, 2001, 2002. $840 to the Jennings County High School School Supply Shop and Schneck Medical Center. $7,423.75 to the middle school and high school to provide free PE t-shirts for students.
Do I have a motion to accept those donations? Motion by Susan, do I have a second? Second by Travis. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Susan, will you call the roll?
Chelsea. Chelsea.
I read it,
Tony?
the lips said yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Travis.
Yes.
Yes.
Earl.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, 7-0. Next, we have the JCSC budget presentation, first reading.
Okay. Set switches are over here. You guys, the board should all have their packet. And go full screen. There we are. All right, next page. Okay, the calendar, we already went through this last time. And we have our first presentation tonight. The second presentation will be the 25th. I'll request to advertise at that point. We'll advertise on the 8th and 15th. And again, it's not in the paper this time, it's online through Gateway, and that's what's required. And plus it's gonna be on our link on our website. Then we'll have a public hearing on the 22nd, and budget adoption is scheduled for October 6th. Next slide shows the 2023 budgets, sort of how they plan on being. There we go. Okay, we have two funds that are supported by property tax. That's the debt fund and the operations, and that's going to be about $12 million is what we receive. And the current calculation for the education budget, which is supported by the state and also local income tax, is about $30,400,000. And just a sort of a summary of the funds we have currently with the school, we got about 56 different active funds. The big three are about 30.2 for education, 3.6 is what that should say. Sorry, it says 3.2 for debt, and then 8.5 roughly for operations. That leaves remaining 13 million coming from a variety of different grants and other, like the Big ESSER grants, part of that, and things like that. So you got those bigger funds in there. Just so you know, the education fund went up as anticipated. The per student went up, and so that's why you're seeing that number go up slightly from that standpoint. Next slide, please, Seth. These are the four funds that will be advertised in 2023. And again, this is it's sort of an odd process. I'm getting used to it now since I've been here 3 years. You basically advertise these high, and then when the rubber hits the road, the state figures out how much they're going to allow you to have, and then you adjust things down to it. So we're advertising $500,000 for rainy day just in case something happens, $35 million for education, $15 million for ops, and $3.661 for debt. That number's actually, that's the only guarantee on the entire sheet at this point. They will allow us that, obviously, because we have to pay that back. So these numbers are very similar to last year. I didn't change much from them because it's inflated right now from an advertisement standpoint anyway. Next slide, please. This is basically a slide explaining what the education fund expenditures are for. No change from last year. No debts paid out of this. No operations are paid out of, obviously, the education fund. You've got a variety of things here between classroom supplies, teachers' salaries, health costs for the teachers, plus health service costs for nurses and things like that are all in the education fund. Next slide's operations fund. This slide didn't change from last year's presentation either. You've got the office here, business office, your insurance, maintenance, transportation, all those items, and plus your fixed and mobile equipment and your bus, different vehicles like the maintenance vehicle, things like that are all paid out of operations also. Next slide is the debt service. So these are going to be your lease, your payments on all your first mortgage bonds and your common school loans. Both come out of here. We currently have 12 bonds and 4 common school loans. You guys just approved one, or you just signed one. We got the schedule for it, I think, last month. So we may be at 5 on that one, between 4 and 5. And that's basically what's used for technology, all the computers and things like that. We try to keep that fund constantly level. As one drops off, I pick another one up. Try to keep that, to keep the computers fresh for all the students. Next slide shows the cash history balance. You see the glaring number on there, like it was last year, is your drop from 17 to 18, and that's when you paid back the insurance fund, $1.7 million. So you see that's the main drop in that. Outside of that, things have been pretty flat. We had a slight increase this year from last year. And next slide just shows the graph of it. Sort of shows you how those cash balances are. And that's the cash balance on December 31st. So, it's only a snapshot in time. It's only good for that one day. Cash balances change the very next day. But it's worth showing on here. Next up is rainy day. Basically, we've got about $3 million in rainy day right now. And that's where I was going to advertise about 500 in case something came up. We did the same thing last year. We didn't end up using any of it so far. We're in August. We haven't used any of the 500 allocation for that. Next slide Shows what our debt service is gonna be. We already mentioned it on a previous slide, but I've always had that on its own just so it sort of is out there and everybody's can see it easy. Next up is education. And the estimate is gonna be, or the advertised is gonna be 35. I'm anticipating it coming in around 32.5. And again, we'll make a slight adjustment for this when I get some updated numbers on all of the extra items. What's what do I call them? I'm not thinking of the word. Like all of the other items that besides the basic grant.
So things like special ed, the
Yeah,
additional
it's got a name
tuition
for all of it. I
support.
can't think of what it is.
Complexity.
Complexity, yes. I'm gonna update the complexity index because we had to let school get started. I gotta get with Ed in the next 2 weeks and we'll update that part. The current education fund is based off of an average of 3,900 students on an ADM. So it's down slightly, but when you look at the calculation, because of the increase in the per student, we're actually up in dollars, but down a little bit down in ADM number. Next slide shows the operations, and it's about 15 is what we're advertising, but I'm anticipating 12.5. It's probably gonna be more like 12, it's hard to say on how that comes in. That's coming in with the intent here is to not raise taxes, so I'm trying to dance that line, which we'll show in a couple slides, to keep that where our taxes stay level. Next slide. Basically just is a information slide. Our current overall operations rate is 0.9479. If our AV was to drop, which is not likely, but this would go either way if our EV went up 15%. If it dropped though, our total value in the city or the county would go down to $768 million, and then our budget would drop by 1.2 million. So it's just there from an information to know if it fluctuates. So, you know, if it went up 15%, you know, we'd be looking at 1.2 extra. So that's why it's on there. Next, I'm anticipating the AV going up slightly. Right now we're about 905, which is there's 9.467. The way I do the calculations shows it could go up to about 914. Now, last time I did that, I only got half of it. So 910 is probably more realistic, but you know, the averages on that, it's all just average of averages. So I've done it the last 3 years I've been here. I've never got it right, obviously, because when you're dealing with average of averages, it's hard to. But I would anticipate somewhere between 910 to 914 on that one. Next slide shows how it's trended in the last 10 years. And anybody that's looked at their taxes already is gonna realize that 2023's estimate will probably be close because all of our taxes have gone up. All of our property values have gone up. Not the tax rate, but the property value has gone up. So I can't imagine us not seeing that trend happen here countywide because I've not talked to a single person that went down like you see in that dip there in 16. That's most likely not gonna happen. All right, next slide shows what the advertised and actual tax rates were in 22. So I advertised 1.84 as you see there. They came in at 1.2998. So they came in less than what we thought, but the problem is if you don't advertise high, then that's the cap. So if I don't go high on it, if I went 1.35 and it calculated 1.38, we wouldn't take advantage of it. So that's why it's inflated, and we know it's going to be lower. So the next slide shows what I'm looking at for 2023, and obviously it's not going to be 2.0. I think it's going to be 1.135 is where I think it's going to end up based on the AV going up, and that would keep the rate right where we're at. You know, with our current debt and our current operations, where I'm anticipating those will be. The goal here is for that to come in where it doesn't affect the taxpayer. That's the goal in this always. So very complicated calculation there, but in the end, we're pretty much stuck with what the state says you're going to have there. All right, next up just sort of explains capped levies. We do have operations fund is capped. there's something called a circuit breaker in the state of Indiana, and taxpayers do not have to pay more than, and I don't know the guts of it that well, but the bottom line is, operations fund is affected by that. Debt service is not affected by that, but education has no levy, so it's not either, but operations is. So that's just there to make sure everybody knows it can be affected by the circuit breaker. And what the circuit breaker basically says, if the taxpayer in our county has certain value or number of value in total on property, they can't be taxed past a certain percentage. So what that means is the school loses money. I mean, I'll just be blunt, that's the result of it. Taxpayer makes out better, but the school does lose money with the tax cap. But it's a state law, so it is what it is. Next up is a summary of what we're doing, same page, I think it's the same as the fourth slide. So these will be the advertisements, the amounts of the advertisements last year. For an example, we advertised 54.5, so we're advertising slightly less this year because operations was pretty good ways out of whack with, I think we had the 15.5 and we got 10. So I decided to bring that down slightly. You know, there's no way we're gonna get to 15.5. So I just tried to make that a little bit more realistic and brought that number down some. Next slide shows the property tax, just sort of information for people, just so they know. Assessed values can decline after recessions, probably because property values typically do, because new construction reduces. But the key to this whole thing is property value. If a property value increase happens in 22, it will be assessed in 23, and it won't affect our taxes till 24. So what we're seeing right now affecting taxes was the value change that happened in 2020, just so you know. Another element of the property tax is the maximum levy growth quotient, and that went from 4.3% last year to 5.0 this year. So that's, I'm not sure with the 2020, yeah, that's a wrong number. It's actually from 2022 is what that's from, because we're looking at the 2023 maximum growth quotient. So I'll fix that for the next presentation. And just to note, if the levy rises more than assessed value, tax rates rise. Local units in districts with rates above 2 are more vulnerable to tax cap losses. Now we're at 1.3, so we are vulnerable. We're just not more vulnerable. People that are at 2 right there, they really get hammered with the tax cap quotient, or with the tax cap that's in place in the state of Indiana. And with that, the last slide basically says, you know, we want to make sure we advertise high, advertise a low AV, and adopt the operations fund at the maximum possible rate we can, even though, you know, it may not be spent. We're still going to try to adopt as high as we can. Is there any questions about this? This is eerily similar to last year, basically with updated numbers. And like I say, I will most likely, we may have a slight ADM adjustment in 2 weeks. Once we see that, we've got an idea what it is now, but if that settles and changes a little bit, we'll have that adjustment, plus we'll have the potential complexity update changing the next one.
So this was a first reading.
First reading.
First reading for the budget. Does anyone have any questions for Philip? Okay, no questions. We'll move to the next agenda item. This is a resolution for approval.
Yes, this is a resolution to allow Treasurer, Deputy Treasurer of Jennings County Schools to make transfers of appropriations within education, debt service, and operation between August 11th and August 25th in order to balance major account classifications. The purpose of this, we normally have this in there when we're going to be more than 2 weeks apart in meetings. It's thrown in there along with paying bills. The reason I need it in here this time is we've got, when I set the budget up, I have to pick numbers for every account. Well, the reality is let's say I picked $10,000 for a school for technical equipment. Well, if the school assesses they need instructional supplies more than they do technical equipment, it allows me to move money there so we don't overspend. But we're not going to overspend in the total school because they know within their school they can jockey some of these numbers around. So that's basically what this is, and then you guys will sign off on the changes I make at the
2 meetings from then. It'd be like the meeting in September or something like that where you sign off on it.
Okay, so this is a request for approval. So do I have a motion to approve that request?
So moved.
I have a motion by Pat, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Travis, any discussion? No discussion, Susan, we call the roll?
Chelsea.
Yes.
Tony.
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
Travis.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Earl.
Yes.
Yes.
7-0. Moving down under operations, we have a school safety review and update.
Just want to share with the board some updates. We've been really focused on school safety and making sure that we have all of our processes and procedures in place and our staff fully informed. So some things that we've been doing over the course of the summer, we had some training for staff members. We actually had a tabletop exercise at the local library with local law enforcement and first responders all attending to talk about the response of a mock scenario and how all those multiple agencies would respond in cohort together to make sure that we're taking care of everyone as quickly and efficiently as possible. We also have had active shooter training at Graham Creek Elementary over the summer with local law enforcement officers receiving training and talking about the coordination of efforts and responses. In addition to that, we've really worked on our building security checklist to start the school year. Every principal has had a meeting with every single staff member by the start of school to talk about all the pieces of school security within the building and who is responsible, to make sure there's no confusion on whose role is what, both in daily preparation and unfortunately if there had to be any response to a crisis. So that includes things like door checks, lock checks, and making sure that all of our staff members have the badges that are appropriate within the building, along a variety of about 54 other items, but those are some examples. Our facilities, we have new things that we've added over the last few years to help increase security, meaning security cameras, fencing around different buildings, multiple other facility improvements. They're in place, making sure that those are all up and working properly. And then finally, just asking for the public's patience and willingness to work with us, keeping kids safe. As they arrive to our schools, they'll notice there is a buzzer system and they will be asked for their business on property and asked to have an ID available to be checked. So we appreciate their willingness to be very open and help be partners in keeping our kids safe every day. So just wanted to share some of those updates of what we've been working on.
Question. I'd like to discuss backpacks one of these days. And I checked with Noblesville, and they did have a shooting there at a middle school with a handgun brought in a backpack. And that was, what, 2 years ago, I believe?
So why don't we see about adding that to one of our future agendas? Let's do a little bit of investigation.
Gather some information.
Yep, and gather some information. I think that's important to do our due diligence, to take a look at that, and then we'll go from there. I just want to share that I appreciate the update. I know this is on everyone's mind. Every magazine or journal, I mean, even this one that was in my packet tonight, talks about school safety. So it is a hot topic, extremely important when we put our kids and our team members first. That's a huge part of it. So I thank you for the work that's been done to get the school year started and make sure that we keep everyone safe. Any other discussion? Okay, so we'll move down under relations. So we have, Nikki, I think you, go ahead.
Asking for approval of an annual MOU with Vincennes University. It's for our dual credit program for TV production at the high school. Same annual MOU is typical. So asking for approval.
Okay, asking for approval for the MOU for Vincennes. Do I have a motion? A motion by Travis. I have a second by Pat. Any discussion? No discussion. Susan, will you call the roll?
Chelsea.
Yes.
Tony.
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
Travis.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Earl.
Yes.
Yes.
7-0. The next MOU.
Asking for another annual MOU. This is approval for Southeastern Career Center to use our buses in the case of an emergency where they need to transport students. So asking for approval of that annual MOU.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So
Motion by Susan. Pat, second. Any discussion? No? Susan, will you call the roll?
Chelsea.
Yes.
Earl?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Next.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
so Peggy Summer was our teacher for students with hearing impairments. She retired this past year, and we would like to contract with her for 3 days a month for her to come in and provide those services. We are exploring sending a few of our teachers. Because it's a hard to fill position, there's actually free classes right now to become a deaf, hard, hearing teacher. So we're actually exploring to get 2 of our teachers to go take those trainings so that they can provide those supports and not have to contract out of district anymore. But asking permission to enter into that contract with Peggy Summer.
Okay, so this request right now is only to enter into the contract with Peggy Summer for
Yes.
3 days?
Yes,
Okay,
sorry.
okay, great. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Tony, do I have a second? A second by Susan, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Susan, will you call the roll?
Chelsea? Yes. Tony?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Earl?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then another MOU.
Asking for approval for an MOU with Ball State to allow us to host principal preparation students who are finishing their internship within our school system. So asking for approval.
Okay, do I have a motion? Motion by Travis, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tony, any discussion? Hearing none, Susan?
Chelsea?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Earl?
Yes.
Yes.
Looks like we're down under other, and it looks like we do have an update. Is that correct? About an essential service committee meeting?
Are the notes in their packet, I believe.
Okay.
of the meeting.
Okay,
And
perfect.
we have no other.
Okay, no other. Hearing nothing else for the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
A motion by Pat, second by Travis. I'm sure there's no discussion, so Susan, will you call the roll?
Chelsea? Yes. Tony?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Earl?
Yes.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.